Welcome into the Raw Knuckles podcast, Tuukka.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Raw Knuckles. Hosted by Chris Nilan.
Nilan going ballistic. I love it. He's going to hit his own players. He's a madman. He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine. Bring them all out, Nilan, you freak.
It's going to be sick.
I remember watching you coming in with Boston and going through your stats and what you've done in the NHL is incredible. And we always hear about Dominik Hasek, Patrick Roy. And where does the name Tuukka Rask come in? Because looking at your save percentage and your goals against in the modern era, anybody who's played over 500 games, you're right up there. Like, you're third in save percentage, and goals against you top 10. Yep. Mm-hmm. And as far as guys in the modern era, there's only four. Is I think Dryden, if we can consider him, Marty, and someone else. But those stats are incredible, and I just don't hear your name as much as I hear all these other guys. As far as your career.
Yeah, well, probably because I didn't win a cup as a starting goalie. That might be one reason. I don't know. I always kind of kept things to myself. I wasn't trying to kind of promote myself and whatnot. Maybe that's the reason. But yeah, numbers were good. That's a lot of it. I think a lot of it credit goes to the team I played behind, and our structure was very defensive under Claude and going on to Butchie too. But yeah, I mean, still not. I guess I'm not trying to take any credit away from me personally, but I think a big part of it was definitely the team and the structure I played behind.
Well, it's funny you say that because I hear a lot about Patrick up here, Patrick Warren. I'm knowing the system that we played in front of him. He benefited quite a bit from. I mean, we certainly, and I don't take any credit away from him, but he benefited from the system we played. And back then we trapped, right? And we had big defensemen. There weren't a lot of second chance opportunities, but Patrick was still a great goaltender, not taking anything away. But when you talk about the way a team plays in front of you, that has a big effect on what you do as a goaltender, no?
100%. I think, I was when I came in the league, it was kind of the end of that era that, the big, strong D-men could just cross-tick the guys out of your way or hook him or hold him and stuff. So that obviously makes goalie's job easier. Your job basically was to make the first save. If there was a rebound, your guys would either block the guy out or clear the rebound. But then towards the end of my career, the game started to become more skilled and there would be a lot of east-west passes, guys crowding across. And that obviously makes goalie's job a lot more difficult. So I kind of saw both eras in the game. But hey, I think still doesn't matter what era you're playing as a goalie. I think your game will reflect upon how your team defends in front of you. You can make first saves, but if your team keeps giving up grade A chances, 10, 50 a game, you're not going to stop 90+% of them. No chance.
So Patrick comes in the league in the early 80s, and all of a sudden we start seeing a change in style of goaltenders, butterfly goaltenders, going down a lot. Go ahead and pick the corner. If you can hit the corner, good luck. You come in and you kind of had that hybrid style of goaltender, right? Yeah. You stayed up a little bit more. How does that come about in your game? Is that something you just felt comfortable with, or were you coached that way?
It was both. I think it was both. I think when I started being a goalie, I was young. I was probably 5 or 6, and that time in Finland, I think we were ahead of our time in goaltending coaching. I had a coach, as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and we started learning the butterfly style early on, so that kind of became a part of my game right from the get-go. But we would play outdoors in the backyard without gear on. You would have just like gloves and pads and no helmets. So that would kind of like teach you how to catch the ball, the frozen tennis balls, without the ball hitting your face, because it'd kill like a motherfucker in your face. And you'd like to you'd play with your shoes on and stuff. So that would teach you the stand-up style and hands being more active and whatnot. So I think that's where the both kind of combined, and I modified my style, fitting my game as I grew, and I guess I kept it till the end, in a way.
Yeah, and it was certainly successful for you. Now, growing up in Savonlinna, Finland, you and your brother's a forward, you're a goalie. You said you started at what? I don't know how many goalies start at that age, to be honest with you, at 6 years old.
Yeah.
How is your brother a forward, and what makes you want to be a goaltender?
Well, my uncle played a goalie in my hometown, and then my cousin was a goalie. And he's 2 years older, so I think that's kind of where it started. And I think it's like every young kid, you're fascinated by the masks and the gear. But for me, it was just a natural choice, I guess. I just liked it. And then I've said that in interviews too, I think I was too lazy to kind of like back check and forecheck and kind of float around out there. As a goalie, you play a big part in the game, of the outcome of the game. I always liked that. So yeah, it was never a question. I like to play outside too, like as a forward in the backyard games. I never played an actual game as a player, but I'm a pretty good skater in goalie standards, I guess. But yeah, it's just I was very intrigued by the whole, goaltending in general, and I never considered anything else.
What is it about goalies when they play alumni hockey? They all want to play forward. What is that?
Well, yeah, I think there comes a time in every goalie's life that you've seen enough rubber, and you're like, enough's enough. I think that was the case with me. And you're used to, if you play in the NHL, you're used to play at the highest level, facing the best players in the world, and then you go to the alumni games, and I think any goalie can agree with me on this. Like, the toughest shots to stop are the ones that like are off-speed shots, or the player who's shooting the puck doesn't even know where it's going. And that's men's league and alumni hockey in a nutshell. So the challenge, I guess, wouldn't be there anymore, and I think it's way more challenging to kind of like try something new and have fun with it. So that's why I decided to play forward.
So at what point, as a young kid growing up in Finland, and you're taking hockey seriously, obviously playing for junior team, your hometown, was it Sapko?
Sapko, yeah.
Sapko, and you're playing junior there. When does it become a goal of yours to get to the NHL? Did you have that goal?
I would say probably at the age of 15 or 16, it started to become a goal, I think. So my hometown, it's about 30,000 people. The men's team, the highest level used to be like the second tier in the Finnish league. So it wasn't even the highest Finnish League One. So I guess my goal when I was a kid was to make that team. But then I got to practice with the big team when I was probably 14 or 15. And then after that, they kind of like the national team select camps come into play, and they start to build the team for under 16s, 17s, and under 18s world championships. And then it was a very quick journey from there, because I moved away from home when I was 16. So I think that's kind of when it became a goal to get drafted and make the NHL at the age of around 16, 15.
So growing up in Finland, Finnish hockey players back in the 70s, there weren't many in the NHL. And you think Matty Hagman played for the Bruins. And then I know when I come in playing against a few Finns early in my career, Rachel Rutsalainen, I think.
Yeah.
As young kids growing up in Finland, did you have that one guy that was like, oh man, he's playing in the NHL?
So it was in the early to mid '90s when I was growing up, and we had like Teemu Selänne was coming up, Gary Curry was there, Tikkanen. There were plenty, but there were not too many goalies. I think the first, I want to say, solid number one was Pasi Nurminen in Atlanta. He was a pioneer in that sense that he kind of like came out of nowhere. He was a hard worker, and he just plowed his way into being number one. And after that became Kiprusoff. He was a little late in his career that he became a number one. Kari Lehtinen, who was always a high draft pick, went to the Trashers. So there were some goalies that I could like look up to and see that it's possible. But like only games we would see in Finland when I was a kid were like the Stanley Cup finals, basically. And we would have once a week, we'd have NHL Power Week that we would watch the highlights and, see all the saves and whatnot and go outside and try to emulate those saves ourselves. But it wasn't like in the 70s or 80s that there would be like maybe one guy or two guys kind of trying to make it in the NHL. We knew it was a possibility to make it.
So all these goalies from Finland, and there's been quite a few, and Russia of late, and it was never that way. I remember in the 80s it was, Patrick, all the Quebec goalies are coming, Luongo, Marty Brodeur, all these guys coming out of Quebec. And has since kind of gone the other way. We don't see a lot of Quebec goalies now. We see them coming out of Finland and Russia. Who's who's responsible for that, one? And two, who is that one coach in Finland that is kind of schooling all these kids?
Well, like I said, like I had a goalie coach from a very young age. So that's number one. If you give any player, any position, you get individual coaching, it obviously helps. So we would have goalie practices once or twice a week from an early age. And then when I moved away from home when I was 16, and I really got to work with the goalie coach on a daily basis. So a guy who was working with me, Jussi Parkkila, who's with Colorado Avalanche now, and he's been here for, I want to say maybe 5-6 years in the States. But so that's the reason why Finnish goalies became so good and popular. It was, I think, not completely, but big part of it is the goalie coaching. And then all these goalie coaches, when the KHL came about, the Russian team started hiring Finnish goalie coaches to go coach there. And now you see a product of that, like Varlamov, Sorokin, Bobrovsky. Yeah. They've been all coached by a Finnish goalie coach, when they were over there. So that's the Finnish goaltending coaching is a real thing, and it worked with me. And you can see working with the Russians too.
So I want to get to your draft year in 2005, your first rounder. One, were you expecting that? Two, you didn't go to the draft back then, did you?
No, that was a lockout year.
Oh, okay, that was the lockout year. That's right. But kids started going to the draft, right? Mm-hmm. At that point, right? Everybody shows up. Your first round, the second round, guys go to the draft. Were you surprised you were drafted in the first round? Were you expecting it? What was that?
I was expecting. Yeah, I was actually surprised that I went that late because I believe that like Ottawa had shown most interest, and Pete Chiarelli was the GM of Ottawa at the time.
Yeah.
So I had meetings with them. They wanted to know a lot. I think their draft pick was number 9, if I'm not mistaken. So then I think they chose a D-man instead. And then it just kept going and going. And at that point, I had no idea who might pick me, and definitely I wasn't expecting Leafs to draft me. And it was nerve-wracking because I was in Finland. Midsummer, it's middle of the night, and you're kind of like internet at that point wasn't like it is now. you know, so little delays. So you just have to wait and see when your name gets called. And lucky it was first round.
Yeah, first round by the Leafs, and getting picked by original six team, awesome. You never play a fucking game for them.
Okay.
And I guess for me, when I think of being in that position, if I was, I want to know what you're feeling like when all of a sudden you never get to go and play for the Leafs. You end up getting traded to the Boston Bruins.
Mm-hmm.
What's going through your mind at that point? Your first round pick, they want me, I'm going to Toronto. They trade me? You're a young kid, right? You haven't been over here yet, and you end up getting traded right away. What was going through your mind?
Obviously, I think it was a surprise in a way, but it wasn't like I wasn't devastated or nothing. So I had never. My plan originally was to stay in Finland for a year or two anyway, and I think Toronto they needed a goalie. Like they were in a spot that they needed somebody as a number one, and the way it ended up working out, I was traded for Andrew Raycroft because he had a great year in Bruins before, and you know he was ready to be a number one. But also they had another goalie prospect, Justin Pogge, who played in the World Juniors during the same time I did. I think Canada won gold medal, obviously one of those years, and then they decided that he's a better option to be their prospect versus me because he was, you know, obviously Canadian. He would go to their minor league system right away, and I wanted to play in Finland, so they just made a decision to get rid of me, and that's that. I never went to their rookie camp. I was never there in their uniform, so to me it was just like, okay, it's just another team. I haven't even stepped foot into an NHL organization's facility, so I know nothing about nothing, so it doesn't really matter to me. I was just happy that some team is going to give me an opportunity at some point.
Who ended up making that trade? Was it Gorton or Chiarelli? Was Chiarelli there yet, or was it Jeff Gorton?
Pete. It was Pete's first year in Boston, first or second year.
Okay,
and that's probably part of it. Like I was saying earlier, that he was the GM for Ottawa when they were looking to draft me, so he kind of knew my talent, and he knew what he was getting.
So you come over. Now, had you been to the States before as a young player with Finland?
I played. We had a couple World Junior tournaments. I think first World Juniors I played in Grand Forks.
So you come over to camp, your first camp in Boston, and you know they have such a tradition. I mean, I grew up in Boston. I was a huge Bruins fan. I heard my whole life what it is to be a Bruin, and always wanted to be one. Mm-hmm. And I got that opportunity late in my career. I only wish it was earlier, but you know, I was all beat up by the time I got there. But you coming over into that that tradition, how long does it take you to realize what it's all about with that team and that city?
Probably a year or so, I want to say. I mean, my first camp, you just show up and you're trying to kind of don't step on anybody's toes and make a kind of name for yourself, try to show what you're capable of. And I think I had a really good first camp. In my eyes, I think I deserved a spot in the team. And the way I practiced and performed, I could have. But obviously the teams and organization's plan was to develop me in the minors, which is totally understandable and which helped me later in my career, definitely. But I think that first year I got to be up. I played 4 games, I think, and then I backed up maybe 20 or so, whatever. So you can kind of sense what it's all about. And that people forget that time, the Bruins were not the Bruins they are now. You know, we're trying to get back to the level of like contending for the Stanley Cup and making the playoffs regularly. So it wasn't like fans were, you know, selling out the rink every single game and they would recognize every single player on the streets. We're still building up to that. And then my second year slowly started getting better and better and better, and then finally, my first full year up, I think we won the cup. So then that's it. You're in a hockey town when the Bruins are back.
Yeah. Now, the Bruins, obviously, that reputation they built in the 70s and 80s, the big bad Bruins. And I know there's something about that fan base in that city that they will not allow the organization to have a pushover team, a team that can be pushed around, a team that backs down, doesn't back down from anybody, and they demand that. The fan base demands that.
Yeah.
That being said, that's a fine line in like today's game, right? When you look at the '80s and the brawls, the fighting. How did they keep that you got to be a Bruin? What is it to be a Bruin? I always hear that, and listen, I have an idea, but I want to get it from you. What is it to be a Bruin?
Oh, that's a pretty broad, tough question, but I think you kind of answered it. You want to show up every single night. You put your boots on. It's a blue collar fan base, right? Like all they really want from you is you put your working boots on, and you go and you put an effort in. And you might lose a game or two, but it's just the way you lose it. Did you put in an effort? Did you put up in a fight? That's what it's all about. You're not giving up. You're not backing down from a fight. You're not throwing in the towel no matter what the situation is. And I think that's kind of the bottom line, what being a Bruin is. You play for each other, you play hard every day, and the results will fall into place. And that's kind of what I feel like we built. When I got to the team, I think Zdeno had been the captain for a year, maybe two. And Berkey had obviously, he'd been around since his draft years, and he was a leader even in a young age. But that's when the culture started being built, that you built it from the ground up. You add toughness, grit, and you make sure that doesn't matter what the situation is, you just keep fighting till the end. And we developed that culture over a decade and so on. And then that's what I think everybody who was part of that should be proud, because that's what the Bruins hockey is all about.
Yeah, I always loved Bergeron, and certainly Big Z. What an impact he had on that organization. Two surefire Hall of Famers.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Absolutely.
I would
Absolutely.
say. I was watching recently before Bergeron retired, and I knew when he went out, they're gonna be missing something. And guys are gonna have to carry the mantle. I get all that of leadership and keeping that team together. But I noticed a couple times, and to me this just showed. And I loved the way he played. He was an honest, hard-working player. He could play offense. He could check. He could win face-offs. He's a great leader. But what really showed it to me one night, they called a timeout, and we're going to pull the goaltender. And you know how the players are on the ice, they go to the coach and they gather around, and there's guys on the bench. Well, there were a bunch of other guys down the other end of the bench, and they were like not paying attention. Mm-hmm. And he fucking went down and said, "Hey," and then pay attention here in case you get on the ice. And all of a sudden, the whole fucking bench leaned over and were looking at the coach and listening to what the fuck he was saying instead of, "Oh, I'm not gonna get on the fucking ice." Why do I got to hear this? And he fucking made sure, and I was like, holy fuck. Talk about leadership, and that said it all to me about that kid. All.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. I mean, that's the type of guy he is, and that's the type of player he was. And you know what? It was during kind of like my career, we had so many of those guys like that. That's what made it so special, that it didn't have to be just him or Z. It was like multiple guys that if they saw something like that, they would keep the other guys in check, and then that's what made it so special. And it was kind of easy to easy to play there because you always knew we had each other's backs and we held each other accountable in all situations.
So you win that Stanley Cup in 2011. I remember watching it and going to Game 7. Lots of pressure. You didn't get an opportunity to play, and that. How difficult was that for you? And I know, I hear it. You're a team guy and all that, and I get it. But still, there's time. I know I went through times I wasn't playing. I was it's so hard. It's so hard just to shut the fuck up and sit there and eat it. And, Thomas is playing all the games. You're not. How was that relationship, you and him? And how difficult was it you to sit back and watch that and not get to play a game?
It honestly it wasn't. Not one bit. So the year before I had my chance, and then we blew it big time against the Flyers.
The Flyers, yeah.
I think that was my rookie year. And then starting the next year, Timmy was basically lights out right off the get-go. And we split the net basically not 50-50, but pretty close to it during the regular season. And then, if I remember correctly, it's just like, okay, so Timmy's going to start the playoff. We'll see how it goes. Be ready. And then he just kept going. And I think for me, it almost became easier to accept my role and be the backup and the cheerleader in that time because, like, there comes a time, I remember, like, I want to say conference finals, Stanley Cup finals. I hadn't played a game in over a month. And you go into practices, and I was like, I don't even know if I could play right now. Like, these guys are on a different level. Like, you just lose your game speed so quickly when you don't see it live action that I was almost happy that I didn't have to play. Because, like, if they throw me in on the Stanley Cup finals, like, I don't know if I can play in the NHL anymore. But it was just fun to watch him do his thing, and I was supporting him all the way. And the way our team, like the ups and downs that our team went through during those playoffs, was just something that we'll always cherish in our memories because it was just a fun run. And then going a few years after, I got the chance to play in 2 finals myself, so I get no hard feelings from that. At least I got the experience.
Yeah, I know. I saw that, and certainly, when you think of that first Stanley Cup you get there, all right? And I remember in '86 when we won, God, you'd think you're going to get back there again.
Exactly.
And now you got back there. I never did. I was like, I was shocked. I'm like, fuck, we got a great team. You win, and never fucking got back there. I missed the playoffs one time in 13 years. But I always was hoping to get back there and never did. It's so fucking difficult. I don't think people really understand that.
They don't.
The average fan doesn't understand how fucking difficult it is.
No, they don't. And that's why it's very true when they say that the Stanley Cup's the hardest trophy to win in all sports, because just by getting there, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of luck, and then to have a chance to actually win it. I've been lucky enough to actually won it, and then being on the losing end 2 times, like how close it is. That it's at the moment it's tough to kind of appreciate what you accomplished just by getting there. But the further along I get in my retirement, you kind of appreciate more of that, how special those teams were just by getting to the finals and having the opportunity to play in the finals, because there's a lot of players who never get a chance to even experience that. So, and
it's nice you look at it that way, because listen, it's easy to sit back now on the outside and look. So you went to 2 finals as a starter and didn't win, and how fucking painful that had to be.
Yeah,
the pain. That's another thing. People don't know how fucking painful that has to be.
It's so painful, but then again, I'm a glass half full guy anyways. But if you really think about it, the margins are that tiny. There's so many. I remember the Blackhawks series. I think there was overtime games that we missed empty netters. We had a post here and there. Things like that can change series, and it's just it's a bounce here, bounce there, and then just that doesn't bounce your way, and that's it at the end of the day. But at the moment, obviously, it's like it's the worst feeling in the world because you start thinking like, shit, we played 82 games and we got all the way here, and the fucking one game, one goal is going to decide the whole outcome of this, and now we have to live with it the rest of our lives. So it sucks, but
well, I'm happy you got to experience that, to be honest with you, and to be able to have won a Stanley Cup, because haven't done so, and I talked to a lot of guys who I've had on here that have never got close to that thing, and it's like you wish. Knowing hockey guys, and majority of hockey guys are fucking good guys. Majority.
Yeah.
You almost wish they could all experience it, but they can't, right? And it's
no, it sucks. And like you said earlier, it's like I was young when we won, and kind of naive, and you're like, "Whoa, this is fucking easy. We're gonna get here next year and the year after," and then the years go by, and you're like, "Whoa, wow! Now we missed playoffs. Now what? We might get fired." It's just like the roller coaster, and then you start to realize the older you get, like, fuck, the older guys were right. They're like, cherish every moment you're in it because this might never happen again, and it's so true. But you're a young kid, you don't see, you don't see.
A couple of things I wanted to talk about. One, when you were in Providence that night, you snapped, and you kind of touched the wires together. Now, I've done that, and it feels fucking great to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened there? What happened there? Was something one of the players hit the post or something on the shootout?
Yeah, well, I think the most controversial event in that shootout was like I poked it, I touched the puck, and the puck went backwards. The guy skated to the puck and shot it in the empty net. So I'm like, there's one. And then it went to the extra shooters, and then the guy comes in, and I can hear a bar
clink.
So I'm like, that's a crossbar. It doesn't bounce like that from the back bar. And the referee points at a goal, and then that's when the shit hit the fan.
Yeah, that was funny watching that. It brought back some memories for sure.
But I think the worst part of that was because I had a shutout going throughout the game and the overtime, so we ended up losing the game 1-0. That was like from goalie's perspective, that's even worse.
2013 against the Leafs quarterfinals. Like, that game is fucking over. It's right, 4-1. You guys are fucking cooked.
Oh yeah,
right. Everybody, so many Bruins fans left. They were like, "Fuck this." They lost.
I would have left too, by the way.
I'm watching it, and I'm going, "Fuck, they're done." I can't believe this. I can't believe they're gonna pull it off. And bingo, that was one of the most incredible hockey game comebacks I've ever seen.
It's got to be up there. It's funny, even talking about it now, it kind of feels surreal. I'm still kind of nervous that, fuck, did we lose that game? No, we actually won. Yeah, it's just,
man.
That's our team in a nutshell. Like I said, that's part of being a Bruin. You don't quit. You just keep plugging away. And I think that was, we call a timeout at some point. It's just like, hey, one shot. It's 4-2, and we still got some time left. And
over 2 minutes left, they pull you, right? It was like 2-something they pull you.
Probably.
And end up scoring fucking 2 goals. Like, that was incredible. And then certainly Bergie tying it, and then Bergie winning an OT. I mean, I watched that, and I got chills watching it. Just knowing not quite what that feels like, because I've been in comeback games before, but something like that was like off the charts.
That was, and that's, as a goalie, like, so you feel like nothing's going your way, You're kind of like just trying to make a save somehow throughout the game. I think it was 4-1, and like there was a breakaway or something, I made a save. But like you don't, as a goalie, you kind of like sometimes you get in the flow, you feel the puck, and you kind of like everything seems easy. That definitely wasn't one of those games. So you're just like fighting to make a save. So now your team comes back, ties it. You go to overtime. You're like, well, fuck, I can't be the guy to fuck this up now. Like that's that's a bad feeling as a goalie because you're like I have no idea how to stop a puck. I'm just trying to get in front of it somehow and hope your team scores first. So that's the beauty of hockey and playoff hockey especially. Like as a fan, it's so fun to watch.
It's not what it used to be. The Canadians, the Canadians Bruins rivalry, not what it used to be. And it has certainly a lot to do with the Canadians because they've slipped so much, and they're trying to rebuild this thing properly now. And I hope it comes to fruition for them and for the league, because I think those original 6 teams are such an important part of this league. They built this fucking league. Yeah. And to have, especially a team of the tradition that the Habs have, to not have them up there, it's fucking painful to watch, to be honest with you. But I like what they're doing here, and I think they'll eventually turn the corner. But being part of that rivalry when it was still fucking meant something. Man, I when I think back to the 80s and shit, the games we had against we played 8 times a year.
Yeah.
We played fucking 3 exhibition games against each other. Yeah. And then the playoffs, we fucking hated each other. It was like insane. And that all got lost here. And I know there's 32 teams now and all that, but the way it's structured, it's almost like the league took those games away from the fan base. And I say that because when you played 8 times a year against each other, you build something there. You build up that animosity. It's almost like they don't want it, because when you have that much animosity against each other, something's going to happen. And they don't want it to happen. They don't want it to fucking happen.
Yeah. It's terrible. It's terrible for the fans. I saw they had the Centennial game here a few weeks ago, and I went there. And if that game was 10 years ago, it would have, the whole town, both cities would have been like crazy about it. But it wasn't the same feeling. Even the game started, it's just like, might as well play against freaking Seattle Kraken or something.
Yeah.
It's just, I remember being part of those games, and sometimes it felt like, why do we even have a puck out here? It's just like, it's a war. But hey, the game is different anyways. The kits are built a little different, so the game's changing, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, goalies, and I gotta goalies. I say this because I think goalies are fucking overprotected. Now, I came from an era where goalies fucking chopped you all the time, or they give you the stick from behind, and you could also fucking run into them inadvertently, by mistake,
of course,
on purpose, on purpose.
A couple times, I bet.
Yeah, but I get protecting them, but I hate it when you see a guy drive the net, which you, as a winger, you're fucking taught, drive that net, take that puck to the net, and then you're battling a D-man and you wipe out and you hit a goalie and the fucking guy gets a penalty. I hate it.
Well, I think that's a lot of it is how the game's sped up. The guys are so much faster. And, I mean, I think I had 1 or 2 concussions, just like one in practice, one in games when the guy drives. It's tough for the D-man because he can't just let the guy go. I think if the guy comes by himself, he's not going to run you over purposely. He'd try to score. But then when the D-man's right there and he kind of loses knowledge where the net is, and he just keeps driving. Now both of them run out of real estate, and
it's you
get killed. It's going to be the goalie. And I get both sides of it, but as a goalie, it's tough because you're coming from that angle. So you have to drop down on your knees to cover your 5-hole, and then you're vulnerable right from there. And then if the guy comes in, you're in a bad angle. There goes your knee, hip, or concussion. So it's tough. But the game's so fast that what are you going to do?
Yeah. Do you think we fucking baby goalies today? And I say that because I look at you played fucking 58 games at 13-14, 70 and fucking 14-15. 64, 15, 16, 65. Hello. And now it's like, well, you think they baby goalies today?
I don't think so. I think the game's it's so much harder on goalies physically and mentally too. I think the game's your scoring chances are way more difficult than they used to be. I think so. The good split, and I was a big advocate on that. I didn't want to play 70 games, because the end goal is to make the Stanley Cup final,
Yeah.
and win it. So if you play 70 games and you end up playing 24 or whatever in the playoffs, that's almost 100 games, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, yeah, I get it. It's a little different. You can probably do that, but this day and age, if you play 55 to 65 games in the playoffs, that's probably a sweet spot, would be my estimate. But yeah, I wouldn't say that they're babying goalies, no.
Yeah. You're trying to preserve them for the playoffs, right?
But then again, if you're a guy who signs a $13 million contract or 12, whatever it is.
Hello.
So, are you going to play 50 games and the playoffs? Or are you going to play 65, 70 games? There's that, So, if you want to make that much money, I guess they expect you to play a lot more. But if you take a little less to have a better backup, now you split the load a little bit more. It benefits you and the team, and better chance of making the cup. So there's those questions to answer, I guess.
When you look back over the years you played, what was your most difficult season, and what was your favorite season?
Oh my God. Difficult. I mean, that was probably the COVID year. It was the most difficult one, just because how fucked up it was.
Yeah.
And then the way it ended, we were doing so great, and then everything goes to a stop. Fun. I don't know. I think tough to. Obviously, the most fun season was probably the one that we won, just because the way it ended. But there were so many fun seasons. All the seasons we went to the finals.
Yeah.
Had deep runs in the playoffs. I guess those were the most fun, but I can't recall one particular one. But I think the most miserable one was definitely the COVID year. And then I think the year after that, I think when I had my hip was all busted and I was playing through it all year. That was kind of
that's tough.
Miserable, you're just kind of in pain all the time. So that's not fun.
The tragedy of an athlete, right? Your body fucking gives out on you, and you can't do it anymore. And so the COVID team, when you certainly you had some issues with that, and you end up leaving the team.
Yeah,
you got, from what I saw, Don Sweeney backed you up pretty good, the general manager.
Yeah, they did. They were so good about it.
Do you think you were, and I thought so, but do you think you were treated unfairly by the fan base somewhat, or the media? Say the media more than the fan base.
I wouldn't say unfairly, because, if you don't know what's going on, obviously you're going to come into conclusions and say whatever you have to say. It didn't matter to me. I knew the decision I made was based on my family, and that comes first. So people can say whatever they want. I wouldn't. It's not unfair, because I'm sure a lot of them would have done the same thing. And I think the whole bubble thing was so manufactured that it just sucked.
Yeah, it did suck. I remember going to fucking playoff game and no one in there. I'm like, it's fucking crazy what they're doing here.
Yeah.
I lost my job. I had a radio job. I lost my job because I wouldn't get fucking vaccinated. And, that's the reason I moved back here, for a fucking job.
Yeah.
And, that whole thing just friggin', it changed so many lives, and now you don't know what to fucking believe, and you don't know what was up.
It's brutal. Sucks to even think about it like that.
Right?
For everybody, yeah.
Such a betrayal. Great playoff numbers too. You fuck, what a career you had. Now here you are, retired. you try to make that comeback. The hips went. You're living in Boston now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You think you're gonna make that your permanent home?
Yeah. We're here. We get 3 girls. They're 10, 8, and 4 now. They're all in the school systems here, and this is all they know. We're lucky enough as an athlete to play in one city for one team throughout your career, which is a blessing as well. So, yeah, we made it home, and we get to go home to Finland every year, every summer, and that's good enough for me. Like, wintertime in Finland is not not ideal.
It's dark.
The weather's kind of like Quebec, but a little darker, I think. So
Yeah.
there's that. But yeah, this is home.
What a I don't. It's funny living in Montreal, and they have the Canadians. They have the Canadians. They have the Canadians. I know they have the Alouettes, but it's not the same,
Yeah.
and no other major league sport. But growing up in Boston, it's so funny. Growing up as a kid, right? The Red Sox fucking broke our hearts all the time. Celtics were one of the best teams in basketball, always.
Yeah.
The Patriots sucked.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny, from the year 2000 forward, just so many good things happened in that city. Every team won a championship. Like, people, it is a freaking unbelievable sports town. No, how was that for you, playing in that environment? Like, just fucking everybody loving this.
It's
their
awesome. I
sports.
mean, it's so good. Like, it is. Well, for hockey players, it's as close to like Montreal as you can get in the U.S. I think. Like, it's not a religion like it is over there. Like, it's
Yeah.
not that like crazy, but it's fun. I think one of the best parts too is like how tight knit the athlete community is. Like, within the teams, like, we get to go to the football games, basketball games, baseball games, and kind of like meet those guys and share our 2 senses of whatever, and create friendship. So that's something that not every town has. And then the fans like kind of like appreciating what you've done and treating you as one of their own is a special feeling as an athlete. And like I said, I've played only one town, one team my whole career, and I feel super lucky to do that. And now I've made it my home with our family, and it's people still recognize me in the streets and thank me for what I did. It's like our girls are like, "What are they thanking you for? This is crazy." I'm like,
Yeah, right?
Boston, yeah. So it's a great feeling, great town.
Before I let you go, just a couple things. I appreciate your time. Playing for your country, all right, 4 Nations is coming up. You play for your country, right? Bronze medal in the Olympics in Sochi, right?
Coach, yeah.
And then World Juniors beat the U.S. Never played in the World Championship, thank God, because you were always in the playoffs, which is awesome. That says a lot. You've won the Vezina Trophy. International hockey, what is it? 'Cause it's so funny. And I say that, the Finns, the Swedes, the Russians, World Championship, playing for your country was a huge thing. And not that it wasn't in the States, but they didn't have the same type of program years in the States, right? You went to college, play college hockey. Hopefully you get to the NHL. They didn't have development programs like you said. You had a fucking goalie coach since you were a young kid.
Yeah.
A lot of American kids didn't. Then they finally started a development program.
Yeah.
And we've seen the results of that recently, right?
Yeah.
We've seen those results. And the U.S. has really taken a jump as far as the international hockey, which I think is awesome. Because for so long, Canada is it. What is it with the Europeans that passion? And I get it. I love my country. You love your country. I get that. But playing for your country, why is it so much bigger over there and it wasn't so much over here when I think of the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think it's just, the way, Finland, for example, is a small country, right? We have like 5 million plus people, and hockey is number one sport. So every year, the World Championship, when that happens, the whole country basically stops and people watch. So it's like, if you think about the World Cup in soccer, that's kind of like how these fans treat it. Because Finnish soccer sucks, but the hockey's great. So like they treat it as like, this is our World Cup every single year, and that's just kind of like every time the national team plays, it brings the country together. Everybody's watching. You're playing for your country and the pride. So it's a special bond that like that country has, and Finland doesn't have too many sports team sports that can kind of like compete on a like a national level with the top countries, and hockey is one of them. So that kind of makes us all feel proud about being from Finland.
How about the rivalry between Sweden and Finland? I played with Mats Naslund in Montreal, Swede. I played Jan Eriksson, Swede, Ulf Dahlen in New York, and Thomas Sandström. Mm-hmm. And they used to call him, they said, Thomas ain't Swedish, he's a fucking Finn. I didn't get it. But
they must be one of the good Swedes then.
Yeah. Well, how's that rivalry like? How is that? And
I think
how intense does it get?
I think that's probably quiet down a little bit too. I think it's always been kind of like, Sweden is a kingdom, Finland has a president, parliament. So there's like a big brother, little brother thing where we think that Swedes think they're better than anybody. So there's always that. You kind of want to show them like, fuck off, we're equal to you. I think that's kind of where it comes from, in a good way. I think the better one or the worst one is the ones with the Russians, because everybody fucking hates them.
Right.
And as Finns, our history is what it is, and you definitely don't want to lose the Russians.
Yeah.
But those are always the good ones to to get up for. And we got a chance to beat the Russians in Sochi actually in the quarterfinals in their home turf, which was good.
Yeah. When you talk about growing up in Finland, how was that, the threat of Russia back then? Because I know as a kid growing up in the 80s, 70s and 80s, the Cold War and all that shit, like it was a real thing. Like there was a real threat there. Did you feel that ever growing up?
Not growing up, no. They had a good relationship growing up. And my hometown is, I don't know, 20 miles from the border.
You're southeast, right? Yeah.
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 But there was nothing, no talk about it. And now it's a bit different now. Like people are like legit thinking about what might happen.
Yeah. That's not good. Listen, Tuukka Rask, thanks so much for taking the time. Great to chat with you. I heard nothing but good things about you from
Thank you, Knuckles.
my friends. And
yeah.
I wish you well, your family well, and take care of my hometown. You know what I didn't ask you though?
What?
The parade. I forgot. Because the parade.
Yeah.
I went to 2 of those as a kid, and I stood out on City Hall Plaza and looked up and saw my hero Bobby Orr, Jerry Cheevers. Fuck, I love those guys.
Yeah.
How cool was that, the parade?
Well,
in Boston. I forgot. I knew I forgot something, but
yeah, it's as cool as you can think. I mean, we hadn't won in 30 plus years, and it is a hockey town when it comes. Like people care about their hockey, and oh boy, you definitely saw it that day because like there was just endless amounts of people in the streets, and getting all the duck boats out and like going through the route. It was. I mean, it's kind of a surreal moment because on one hand, you're trying to get it all in, but then on the second hand, you're just like trying to enjoy and like, you're kind of like, well, what the fuck? Like you can just see people, these are people and with no ends in sight. And I wish it was now, so you kind of like you'd have all kinds of drones and video cameras.
Yeah.
Like that time we had like these little flip cameras they gave us, and I don't even know where mine is. But yeah, it was a special day for sure. And I think I said it somewhere. That was, you know, like to see the city come together like that. It was a special feeling, and kind of like being on the end of it, like, well, we were the ones who did this, and you see kind of the outcome, how everybody comes together and appreciates each other and your team was a very special day.
That's cool. All right. Again, thanks for joining me. All the best to you and your family.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
All right, you too.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Raw Knuckles with Chris Nilan on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.